It seems just a few months ago that we were talking about Aston Martin as the most informed team on the current grid, as race by race they were consistently racking up points and podiums. But in the space of just a few races, everything has changed. They've gone from being Red Bull's nearest challengers to being comfortably in the midfield pack. And judging by their current form, it seems as though it's going to be a tough run-in to the end of the season. Just like Benetton in the late 90s, Aston's form's completely dropped off as the season has wore on. In fact, in the recent Singapore-Japan doubleheader, out of a possible 52 points, Aston has scored just 4. And they've only scored one podium finish in the last 8 races, leaving their ambition to finish second in the Constructors' Championship nothing but a dream. There was probably a combination of factors that has led to Aston Martin's decline, particularly in the second half of the season. But you've got to remember that they started the year on the front foot. They were clearly the second fastest team, only behind Red Bull, after making exceptional gains over the winter. In fact, up to the Spanish Grand Prix, they were second in the Constructors' Championship. But it seems that the main factor in this is the fact that Aston has been outdeveloped by the teams around them, the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren. If you look at Mercedes, even though their revised concept from Monaco onwards hasn't really delivered the results that they were hoping for, they've still managed to get podiums and pole positions. Same with Ferrari, even though their performance hasn't really reached the heights they're expecting to. In recent races, their form has actually improved. They were the first team other than Red Bull to win a race in Singapore, and McLaren has made the biggest gains of them all from Austria onwards when they introduced their improved package. And part of the reason as to why Aston Martin has been outdeveloped by their nearest rivals is the fact that the team has admitted that it has gone in the wrong direction in terms of car development. When they were trying to find even more performance by bringing new upgrades to the car, it was in fact actually hurting the raw pace of the car that they had carried through the majority of the season. And even though they had a brief renaissance at Zandvoort when Fernando Alonso finished in second place, apart from that in recent races Aston has looked nowhere. But regardless of whether the team has made mistakes in car development, a constant that has remained throughout the season is the fact that Aston Martin still looks a one-car team and is still having to rely on Fernando Alonso's brilliance to get the most out of the car over a race weekend. In fact, even though Aston's performances have dropped, Fernando is still somehow managed to get the maximum out of the package. What's also going to be attributed to Aston Martin's downfall is the fact that Lance Stroll has not been able to back up Fernando enough this year. His performances simply have not been good enough, especially for a team that has clearly high ambitions for the future. I made a video earlier in the year explaining why I thought that Lance was clearly the weak link in the team, and Aston Martin simply could not ignore this anymore. If you look at his performances over recent races, since the summer break we've had 4 races and Lance has not finished in the top 10 in any of them. And what's a worry for Aston Martin right now is that with the car underperforming and Lance going through a bit of a rough patch, they have fallen so far behind Ferrari and Mercedes in the battle for second in the Constructors' Championship. They are currently 64 points behind Ferrari and a further 20 behind Mercedes. So their hopes of battling for this P2 in the Constructors is surely all but over, and they just need to focus on finishing 4th if they can. But even that won't be so easy, because McLaren are making so many inroads into their deficit to Aston Martin in the standings. After the Canadian Grand Prix, which was the 8th round of the season, McLaren were 138 points behind Aston Martin in the championship. But since Austria, when they introduced that revised package where they've managed to make a huge leap in performance, they've reduced that gap to just 49 points. And their chances of actually catching Aston Martin were boosted by the fact that they scored 57 points over the Singapore-Japan doubleheader, including a double podium finish in Suzuka. In fact, McLaren's form has been so strong these past 8 races, they've scored the second most amount of points out of all the teams, only behind Red Bull during that same period. And they've been catching Aston Martin at a rate of knots since Austria, to the point where it actually looks inevitable that they will pass them for that P4 in the Constructors' Championship before the end of the season, because Lando and Oscar are continuing to get both of the cars inside the points. We saw for the first time this season at Suzuka that Fernando's patience was just starting to wear thin, probably a mixture of what was happening during that race with the poor strategy that he made clear over team radio, but also how the season is starting to go in terms of Aston's decline in performance. There's no doubt that Fernando will be frustrated to have a season has panned out, because he did start the year with a car that was clearly capable of fighting for podiums on a consistent basis, and there was even that talk in the media of him winning his 33rd career race, but obviously it never happened, and it probably isn't going to happen for the rest of this season at least. It's going to be interesting to see how he deals with his emotions for the rest of the year now that he hasn't got his competitive machinery. We know that he's not afraid to let his feelings known publicly if he is not happy with how the car is performing and it is not meeting his lofty expectations. Another theory behind Aston Martin's decline in the second half of the season could be the sliding scale that was introduced in 2021, where depending on where a team finishes in the Constructors' Championship, that will determine how much time they have to develop the car. Part of the reason as to why Aston Martin made such a huge leap in performance over the previous winter was because they finished in 7th in the Constructors' Championship in 2022, giving them more of an allotted time compared to the teams at the front of the grid to develop their car. But because when the sliding scale resets, as it does every 6 months in June, they were second in the Constructors' Championship at that point, so they had the second least amount of time to develop the car compared to the teams around them. I mean, we can go on all day about which factors have had the most impact on Aston Martin's drop in performance, whether that be the sliding scale, Lance Stroll's drop in form, or the fact that the team went in the wrong direction in terms of car development. But I think that the team as a whole will look at this as a warning for 2024 and beyond, because they are now a serious operation. They have serious ambitions to be a World Championship winning team in the future. They've got a new factory, they've got a new state-of-the-art wind tunnel that is coming in 2024. They've hired several technical senior staff from rival teams that have already shown to be a benefit to the team. And of course they've got Honda coming on board in 2026 as a works engine partner. So this clearly is in a line with their serious ambitions to be a World Championship winning team in the future. But this little dip in form will certainly serve as a reminder to them that they need to take the right decisions at the right time if they want to continue making inroads to the teams ahead of them. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on Aston Martin and how their season is unravelling. But now I want to hear what your views are. Do you think that Aston Martin can finish 4th in the Constructors' Championship? Or do you think that McLaren will catch them before the end of the season? And what do you attribute to the main factor behind Aston Martin's drop in form? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. But also don't forget to leave a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.